viviamo momenti unici che vogliamo proteggere. Scegli Immagina adesso di Generali, un'unica polizza che evolve con te. Contatta subito i nostri agenti Generali per scoprire la soluzione più adatta a te. Prima della sottoscrizione leggere il set informativo su generali.it. Generali, partner di vita.
Siamo Invitalia. Lavoriamo per lo sviluppo del Paese e crediamo nel valore delle sue risorse. Un giovane pieno di talento, un territorio ricco di potenzialità, un'impresa che vuole crescere, una pubblica amministrazione pronta ad innovare. Il nostro Paese ha un potenziale di sviluppo inespresso. Per questo lavoriamo con la pubblica amministrazione, per riconoscerlo e orientarlo alla crescita. Aiutiamo i territori ad essere più attrattivi e connessi con la loro memoria. Siamo al fianco delle imprese che puntano ad essere più innovative e competitive, al fianco dei giovani e delle donne che hanno un'idea di futuro e vogliono realizzarla, anche quando il futuro è tutto da ricostruire. Facciamo questo con la responsabilità di chi crede nelle risorse del proprio Paese e si impegna a renderle protagoniste.
La civiltà dell'amore, fratelli e sorelle, costruite senza stancarvi mai questa civiltà. Lavorate per questo, pregate per questo, soffrite per questo.
Bentrovati.
Welcome and good afternoon. Thank you for being with us this evening. This is yet one of the many interesting sessions of the Rimini meeting. The Rimini meeting entitled A Passion for the Person. This session is going to deal with the NRRP, the National Plans for Recovery and Resilience, National Resilience and Recovery Plan. And we're going to address the topics related to the NRRP with the presidents of the Italian regions, who are the ones who, together with mayors, are more capable of conveying the needs of their territories. I'm going to introduce them by alphabetical order. Francesco Acquarelli, the president of the Marche region, Stefano Bonaccini, the president of the Emilia-Romagna region, Attilio Fontana, president of Lombardy, Maurizio Fugati, the president of the autonomous province of Trento, Eugenio Gianni, the president of Tuscany, Donatella Tesei, president of the Umbria region, Giovanni Toti, president of Liguria. Thank you all for being here with us today. After introducing and thanking our guests, I would also like to personally thank Andrea Simoncini, the Vice President of the Meeting for Friendship Among Peoples. It is also thanks to Andrea Simoncini that I have the chance this year as well to moderate this session. I would like to leave the floor to Mr. Simoncini for some introductory remarks. You have the floor. Also on my part, good afternoon and many thanks to everybody. If you just have a look at the guests we have on stage, actually I think that only Roberto Inciochi alone would have probably been the only one capable of bringing these people together. So thanks for his friendship and thanks for his professional capacity. He's a renowned he's a renowned journalist for the broadcaster Sky TG24. My I also have the pleasure and the honor to thank all the presidents of the Italian regions who are with us this evening. I would also like to thank President Musumeci, the president of Sicily. Due to personal engagements, he has been unable to attend. As we know, the Rimini meeting has always hosted interesting dialogues and conversations between representatives of the regions. So they regularly come, and they're dear friends of the Rimini meeting. And they're always welcome. This afternoon's session is going to address an impossible challenge from two main perspectives. First of all, we are in the middle of an electoral campaign. This is well known. And this evening, we have 7 protagonists of the national and local political debate. And yet, they are here not so much to stand in favor of their respective political parties, but they're here as presidents of the regions, of the local regions. So they're here in order to illustrate another way of doing politics, the politics of the common good. For those of you who participated in the meeting with Giuliano Amato. So they are the representatives of their respective local communities. The second challenge is that we're going to talk about the NRRPs. So the NRRP is something that has been addressed by everything. We're talking about huge funds. About 190 billion euros are going to be devoted to Italy. I've had a look at the sums set aside for the Marshall Plan after the Second World War, and back then we had $14 billion. The Rimini meeting, however, is not the place in which administrative or bureaucratic talks take place. Its aim is to try and understand, as citizens, what these major challenges can bring in the everyday life of every people. So the second challenge is that we aim at clearly speak about the contents of these plans and to understand actually what hopes can be fulfilled with the national recovery and resilience plans. And after saying this, I'd like to leave the floor back to Roberto Inciocchi. So the NRRP, this is a very complex challenge. This is a plan that will influence the economy of our country, and it will also implement a major cultural change. We will all be changed if this plan is successful. We will be called upon to change our attitudes, and our administrators will have to convince us that what we've done so far for over 80 years will have to be changed, our lifestyles and our behaviors. So that's the second part. So I would like to start with the NRRP, development and enhancement and promotion of the territory. I'd like to have a first round of answers, and I would like to have an answer from all of you to tell us what you are doing, what has been done, what will have to be done, what the criticalities of the plan are, and what should be changed of the plan if something should be changed. I'd like to start from President Bonaccini, and then I'll leave the floor to all the other presidents. So, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for your kind invitation. Once again, congratulations for this extraordinary meeting that has long seen the support of the Emilia-Romagna region. So in about 4 minutes, I will attempt to tell you what I think about the plan. First of all, I think that the NRRP is a historical occasion for us. We will never have a similar occasion in the future. There are about 200 billion euros transferred to Italy and to Italian territories. So far, the regions, the local communities and the entities have received so far 5 billion euros. The Emilia-Romagna region, if we're good, is expected to receive between 12 and 13 billion euros. together with this 200 billion euros, there's much more money. There's many more money that makes up for a total of about 300 billion euros that Italy and its regions will have in the following 6 years. That is because each and any one of us has received some kind of a share of the so-called 7-year European funds that Europe devotes to the member states, and then each member state to the regions. Just by way of example, the Emilia-Romagna region will go from 2.4 billion regions for the period 2014-2020 to over 3.5 billion euros for the following 7 years. This money comes on top of the NRRP share, and that's a huge occasion. So we have to be very good. We have to avoid duplication of spending, and we have to spend this money well. Let me give you a couple of examples of of the areas in which we are working, and then I would like to address the only risk that I envisage, that I have identified. It's a complicated ratio. 20 billion euros will be addressed to investment projects in public health. Out of that money, we will receive 530 about 4 months ago, together with all the working groups of the 9 provinces of the Emilia-Romagna region. So there was an agreement among all the mayors, irrespective of their political parties. So we delivered all our projects to the government, and that money will be used for hospitals, especially community hospitals, local hospitals, then the so-called health houses. About 1/4 of the health houses that are perfectly working are in the Emilia-Romagna region. They've been very important because they are basically local health centers, and they are the very first spots in which patients are taken care of. And if they work, it has been proven that accesses to emergency rooms have decreased. Then home care. This is something that is particularly important. We know that it is particularly important to treat people at their homes in order to avoid that, especially the elderly, are not taken away from their homes. And then one last element of spending, the purchase of medical equipment and machinery. So we have already sent the projects to the state, divided by each of these specific entry. And we really hope that if we're good in spending this money well, we will be capable of further enhancing the level of the public health, of our public health, which, especially the one of the Emilia-Romagna region, ranks among the very first in Europe. Second, in the Emilia-Romagna region, we are accommodating the European weather center. So due to the Brexit, that center was previously hosted in the UK. Now it's going to come to Bologna. And the machines for this center have already come last year. Mario Draghi was the first one to inaugurate this center. Over the next few years, about 1,500 researchers will come to Bologna, because the weather forecasts will be made from here in Bologna. Thanks to the Draghi government and the European Union, we received 250 million euros that we invested for the purchase of the calculation hubs, calculation computers. That computer will be one of the 5 most powerful computers in the world. That's needed because our children and grandchildren will perform jobs in the field of robotics and in the field of digitalization. So those things will be the future, and they will enable Italy and Europe to be competitive, truly competitive, in the competition between the United States and China. So we got about 300 billion euros in order to become one of the most important national research centers financed by the NRRP. There's one thing that concerns me. We are facing the energy crisis and the inflation, and this has led to an increase in prices, in energy prices. So irrespective of the future government, we need to find the way and to understand that this huge opportunity is not countered by the fact that the raw materials are too expensive, and that therefore the call for tenders when it comes to the purchase of raw materials are attended by as many candidates as possible. Thank you. So, the floor to Attilio Fontana, the President of Lombardy.
Thank you very much for this opportunity, because it is always a really special occasion to be able to talk about the future of our country. This is truly a great opportunity offered to us by the NRRP. So it's a great moment for having resources, and if we have a prepared ruling class, we will be able to give concrete and positive responses to the future of this country. Otherwise, it's better for everybody to stand apart. The Lombardy region will receive about 10.5 billion euros from the NRRP, and as a regional authority, we will only manage about 2 billion euros, 1.9 billion euros that will be used for the health sector. We also have already started the construction and the inauguration of hospitals and of community houses, and part of that will also be used for mobility, with the purchase of some trains and also social building, council houses. With these projects, we are on schedule. In fact, we are ahead of schedule for some of them, and I can say that the regional authority is working correctly in this respect. Another story is about local authorities, because they have objective constraints. It's not about a lack of skills in the local authorities, but it's the fact that public administration cannot hire. And so many of the local authorities that are going to be the implementation subjects for many projects are in the concrete impossibility to have sufficient human resources to implement everything. As a regional conference, so we have already presented this problem to the government. We hoped for greater involvement of the regional authorities, and in this respect, we gave our feedback to the possible hiring of 1,000 experts, and these new subjects can start working as of September in those local authorities that are having difficulties in terms of human resources. What President Bonaccini said is important about ordinary resources that will arrive from Europe, and I can be proud, as I say, that Lombardy has been one of the first regions having their projects approved by the European Union before the summer break, before July. And so as a region in Lombardy, in September, we will be able to be operational in this sector. Just a small point to be added here. It is clear that in the floor allocation and in the distinction between ordinary funding and NRRP funding, there must be some homogeneity, because there can be some overlapping, of course, but this is one of the reasons why we made a request in the national planning to have more participation of the regional authorities, specifically to avoid these overlapping. Just to conclude very briefly, as a Lombardy region, we are also proud to say that our own NRRP was approved even before Europe thought about that, because in May 2020, so in full swing of the pandemic, we realized that we needed to give a stimulus to our economy, and we realized how important it was to make our entrepreneurs aware of the fact that we believed in them, in their recovery, in the need to act. And since the month of May, we made 3 billion euros available that with the subsequent budgets were raised to up to 4 billion euros of public investments that are oriented exactly in the same direction that we got from the European Union within the National Recovery and Resilience Plan, so urban regeneration, digitization, investments, research and innovation, green development, all these subjects, all these areas had been identified, and we have made the resources available in this respect. So please, can you complete the point? Yes, the resources are there. We have to be able to demonstrate that the project that we have for the future of our region and our territory is there also, and that we have greatest availability, greatest effort not to lose this great opportunity. Thank you. Thank you, President. Professor, as you have heard, we have convinced our entrepreneurs. This will be addressed in the second part, how to convince. In the Marche region, President Acquaroli, thank you. I would like to thank you too for this invitation. It's always really a great opportunity to have a dialogue, and in a particular occasion. 1.2 billion euros have been received by our region, the Marche region, from the PNRR, and as one of the regions affected by the earthquake in 2016, we also have the opportunity of the complementary NRRP, about 600 million euros, 700 million euros, to deal with earthquake-related problems. So about half of that is affecting our region. I could see that in the complementary plan, there's been more involvement of the regional authorities and the other regions affected by the earthquake. And we were able to work in a team with the communities. And over the next few weeks, we will have some calls that will be really important to relaunch those areas. On the other side, we also have a national plan that have an overall scope that started during the pandemic and that has arrived right after the pandemic, that has created a big problem in the whole of the country. And I think that today it is important, and it is also fair, to review it, because I can see tangibly that competitiveness in our country and the thoughts of our companies in our country right after the summer break are all focused on the cost of energy, the cost of raw materials, and competitiveness that is being called into question. So this is indeed a great opportunity, and it will be also a debt that will have its bearing on the future generations. So it's a particular time that we are living, for sure. And then some fundamental assets have been identified, for example, innovation, digitization, greener Europe, a more connected Europe, and also concerning the purchase of means that are more adequate to deal with the challenges of our society, and also our healthcare system, especially for the smaller communities, fragmented communities. We are well in line in this respect. But I also believe that it will be necessary to review the distribution of those resources so that they can be really taken to the full, and we can really keep up with the speed that we are living with. This speed brings politics and institutions to a situation in which everything should be considered. We have to be careful. I would refer now to President Fontana's word in the fact that this is a really critical moment. We have so many small municipalities, small communities that are really struggling to carry out their ordinary administration. They can't really take advantage of the NRRP opportunities to the full because they don't have the human resources that are necessary to take advantage of this opportunity. So in this moment, I believe it is really important to involve everyone so that the national plan can be a tool for everyone. And my last point is this: I hope it will also become a tool that can bring a comprehensive vision of the country in terms of infrastructure and connection. Otherwise, the risk is to have parts of the country that will grow and other parts of the country that won't grow. That's what we will see later in this session. And the possibility is there. It can be done. We can truly try and do something and review parts of the National Recovery and Resilience Plan President Totti mentioned that, referred that. So there is openness to some calibrated changes, but we can't really start from the beginning because it's really a problem of time. President Totti.
Okay, first of all, this is the first time that I see so many presidents of Italian regions sitting together in the same room since the pandemic broke out. The digital world has made us more efficient, but it has also made meetings in attendance less frequent as we used to do when we traveled to Rome before the pandemic. I think that also meetings in attendance and meeting personally is equally important. So, as regards the NRRP in Liguria, in the Liguria region, first of all, the NRRP would be a synecdoche. In other words, it would represent a part for the whole. The NRRP is referred to when we refer to the major administrative and changes are financed by many spending entries, but that's not the only one. That's the biggest one. Then we have European funds. Furthermore, you also have state funds. The state funds are being, in a way, spent progressively depending on their deadlines. For example, there was an infrastructure linking Genoa to Milan that is an infrastructure that is going to be funded with the NRRP, and therefore the money that we had set aside for that infrastructure we're going to spend for other more urgent projects. So the NRRP, then European funds, there are funds for the agricultural sector, for education, there are development and cohesion funds. I mean, all of these funds have an easy and a difficult task. The easy task is the infrastructures. Infrastructures is not present in our country. In the Liguria region is one of the most financed region when it comes to infrastructure. That's probably also because actually logistics is so important because of its ports, of the Liguria region. And there, the difficulty lies in a way, truly finalizing infrastructures, building and finalizing infrastructures very quickly, and doing them also very quickly. First of all, because the deadlines for the NRRP will soon expire, and also because this is linked with the competitiveness of our country. We are in an electoral campaign, and everybody is talking about the way in which they're going to distribute the health. But that health has to be produced before. So if, for example, we're going to build a dike, a dam, and a port, that makes sense because there have been canals like the Suez Canal that has been doubled. If that dike is created in 15 years, well, actually the ships will be even bigger, and that dike will be useless. That's maybe a trivial example, but time makes a difference. Timing makes a difference. So the Genoa model is often referred to when making reference to the fact that we've been able to build the Genoa viaduct in reasonably quick times. This has to deal with the basis of legislations, with the laws, and also with the police forces and the enforcement forces. At a given moment, you have to make a decision, and it is also necessary to say, okay, certain decisions are priority decisions, and you have to decide. The most difficult thing is to decide actually who's going to use those infrastructures. That's a challenge that is even more difficult because that pertains to vocational training, digitalization, and also the redrafting of our collective deals. Second-level collective bargaining has to be implemented. So, for example, if you have third sector profit-making companies, that means that the public sector can step back, and certain regions have failed because contracts were not adequate. It's very easy to build health houses, but then you have to equip them with doctors. Doctors and the health personnel have to work in those centers. That means that you need to spend in their education, in their training, and that they need to have a contract allowing them to work there. We've, in a way, kind of shifted the Italian debt and turned it into European debt. This doesn't make us freer. In other words, we are, in a way, making debts. And this is debts that not only an Italian is going to pay, but also our European citizens, our European co-citizens. So we are making a huge qualitative and quantitative leap that's important to point out. So that's clear. What you are pointing out is really very, very clear, and I think that everybody agrees with you on that. When we talk about the NRRP, sometimes I feel I am I'm doing a bit too much rhetorics, but that's true, because actually we are preparing the future. We're paving the way for the future, and it will be our children and grandchildren who will also pay part of that debt. The floor to President Donatella Tesei. Thank you very much. Thanks for this invitation. Participating in these sessions is always a very interesting moment to have an exchange of ideas and to also grow personally. Thank you very much. So, along this trend, I would also like to tell you what the Umbria region has done. We have fought a lot to try and bring interesting financing from the NRRP, especially for the financing of infrastructures. We are a central Italian region. We have always suffered a lot because of poor infrastructure, and we've always tried to do our best to bridge that gap. We have been allotted about amounting to over 1.6 billion euros for a series of projects. Other projects are going to be financed by the funds of the NRRP as well as with national funds. I'm not going to list the things that we have done in the Umbria region. Of course, the Umbria region, like I said, there was an urgent need of this money, and also the additional funds for the NRRP that are related to the earthquake has given us a great help. We've always discussed this issue a lot and fought a lot to get that money. We meet on a regular basis because we have to face the issues related to the reconstruction of the areas of the earthquake. And there has been a recent report drafted by the Earthquake Commissioner Lignini, that has shown that we've made a huge leap forward. Many building sites are open, many works have been finalized, and so the additional complementary NRRP is fundamental because it will help us promote the economic and social development of the communities living in the areas of the earthquake. That's fundamental. Simply because it is not enough to build houses and buildings. What you need is also to give hope to the communities who live in these areas, who live in internal areas in the country, which are the Apennine, the regions of the Apennines. There are two colleagues of mine today who are my neighbors, so President Acquaroli and President Ciani. There is a topic that we together are trying to put forward and bring to the attention of the others, and which is, in my opinion, particularly important whenever we talk about the NRRP and the new programming activity for the 7-year EU funds. I mean, all regions have worked to draft their projects, for example, for the financing of health facilities. But nobody actually focuses on the fact that we miss the health personnel. So even if we build important health facilities, we need to have the personnel. They are important facilities, but we need to equip them with health personnel. The other issue is that the NRRP is the consequence of the pandemic. So health is yet another important aspect. Health cuts have been implemented in all regions. So we are still working on the fact that there are some COVID-related expenses that are not being paid to the region. So this is a very complex topic. And all of this revolves around the projects financed by the NRRP. So the issue of Central Italy. Central Italy is the hinge of the country, and that is basically something, it's a topic that cannot be ignored by any region. It cannot be ignored by the northern regions. I'm addressing in this respect President Bonaccini and my dear friend Attilio. I've had the great chance to work with President Bonaccini when he was the president of the Conference of the Regions. And also I'm referring to southern Italian regions who have to make up. They will receive a very high percentage of the funds of the NRRP. 40% has to go to southern Italian regions. In the middle of Italy, in the center of Italy, we have the Apennines and extraordinary regions. So if we want to connect the whole country, both in terms of infrastructures and economically, if we want to have a whole country, a country that needs to recover its economic strength, that means that Central Italy will play a fundamental role. So my work, the work of President Gianni and President Acquaroli, as well as the president of the Abruzzo region, will have to be considered a priority work for this country. We will certainly work on this. So thank you very much, President Tesei. As you know, I've often dealt with the earthquake. I've talked to many mayors of small towns. So you rightly said that we need to build houses, but we also have to rebuild the social fabric. This is what we call the upon to work. We will have to do sustainability work. We will have to have a greener society and services, but we need to equip excellent services with qualified personnel. President Fuerte.
Velocemente.
Good afternoon. Very briefly, let me thank you all for the invitation. I believe that the origin of the NRRP, as President Tesei said, was born with the COVID fear. Because of the pandemic, the European Union set aside the fear for austerity and started to provide resources on the market because we need to have investment to increase our GDP and to have growth. And this is what the EU has done with the NRRP. It started, it goes on, and then we have the war, the energy crisis, the costs of raw materials, and rightly President Bonaccini said we can't really have call for tenders and then nobody applies because companies are not competitive. And we can't even stop either because otherwise the origin of the NRRP doesn't have any reasons to be. And unfortunately, as many economists say, there is the crisis or the crisis about to be here. But in fall, we have to continue to believe in growth. So the central subject of this debate, I think we have to understand what to do within this situation of crisis with the energy crisis and so on and so forth. The Draghi government allotted 10 billion euros in the latest decree, and this is one way to go. But I believe that if the aim is to have growth and to have sustainable growth for more employment, we don't have to stop and think too much. It is right to stop and see how the world has changed, because the world has changed indeed, but we don't have to stop and redo the NRRP, because otherwise the anti-cyclical policies that are within the NRRP run the risk of stopping, and so we can't really face the incoming economic crisis. So it's important to implement the investments, start investing truly, and see those that are more sustainable. It's not about digging a hole and then covering it just in a Keynesian perspective. We have to do good holes and to fill them with good things. That's the spirit of the NRRP. In our community, we have 1.4 billion euros with the NRRP, and the major parts are about work of economic sustainability, that is moving the railway line. No, sorry, just to move heavy traffic to railway traffic with the Brenner Tunnel, which is also affecting our community, and 930 million euros are invested in this respect, which is one of the objectives of the NRRP for sustainability. Thank you, President. So we end up with the President Gianni from Tuscany. Thank you. I feel the obligation to follow my colleagues' statements in a positive way, as we want to be involved as community, as territories, thanks to the NRRP. We have 3.1 billion euros of projects that have been financed up until now. 1,071 projects have been financed. And then if we check the calls, what will come is not already put into a ministerial decree, but we can foresee to get to up to more than 4 billion euros, 4.2 billion euros. So this is good news, and we've all mentioned this. So I think we have to share some reflections here. One of the messages of the National Recovery and Resilience Plan is that we may have implementation decrees for these investments. We can invest in 1,071 projects with 3.1 billion euros. At the same time, this is something that is not part of the NRRP, but it is part of the contract between the regional authorities and the railway company. So we have a contract there. On the 10th of August, there was a call for tender that was published for the high-speed line in Florence as an underground line that will complement the high-speed line between Milan and Rome. But so my reflection is 3.1 billion euros with 1,071 projects and 3.1 billion euros for one project. So can you see how important the NRRP can be to support the project and the resources that are promoted by local authorities? We've always thought of infrastructures and investments from a macro perspective, but the NRRP is helping us understand the importance of micro projects. For example, the urban planning regeneration plans in the small municipalities, in diffused Italy that has to deal with depopulation in some areas, and basically this enhancement of communities should be more humane, just to recall the meeting's words. And this is part of the European spirit. We have to help the small communities and the local authorities there to plan and to be able to take advantage of the NRRP today and tomorrow to the calls proposed by the government. So this is a positive aspect. There is another positive aspect. The National Recovery and Resilience Plan, if we consider the Tuscany region, equals to 4.2 billion euros over the next 6 years. Structural funds that increase as we have the 4 chapters of the structural funds, the European funds, the Italy-France department, and the Agriculture Fund. So this year, for the next 7-year time frame, or 6 years, we foresee to have 3.3 billion euros that can be summed up to the 4.2 billion euros for the National Recovery and Resilience Plan. So what I have in front of me is 7.7 billion euros, 7.5 billion euros. If I check the budget of the Tuscany region and I exclude the healthcare system because it's got its own budget, and I see the current standards, we have 1.1 billion. If I multiply it by 6, I get 6.6 billion euros. So what is the message? Even without knowing that, Europe today is the protagonist in our budgets, in our services, in our work as public administration, much more than we might have from our state and our own budgets. We don't realize it, but we are more and more Europe. So the great message is, thank you, Europe. We should really think about this more and more. This is the message that the NRRP is offering us, and we have to be able to grasp it. And the third point I want to make is that one of the greatest challenges in our future now is to connect these big expenses, these big investments to the national budget system. It's already been said, but I want to mention it, I guess, because it is our problem. I will create 70 community houses or health houses and 35 community hospitals. Districts will become community operational areas. But do you remember what we were saying during the pandemic when we were all isolated in our own houses? We used to say, nothing will be the same again. And as president of the region for healthcare, which is the most precious thing, health, we realize that if we don't complete our budget, if we don't fulfill our budget, we will be commissioned, and so we will be sanctioned. So the increase in the public spending for health is the most important part because it's the most precious thing. So this commitment does not have to be isolated from the NRRP, but should be connected to a state policy that will hire more doctors and that will have more human resources in those infrastructures. Otherwise, nobody will be there to work. Or think about renewable energy and the challenge of energy transition. I am the first one that is trying to change the rules in the region to have solar panels and wind turbines, but it's really difficult to do so. Everybody will benefit from this to decrease the cost of energy. But as president of regions, we have to give a stimulus so that in the regional autonomy, we can have some rewarding systems to get the contributions from the state so that our country can truly become the first to implement a transformation in terms of renewable energy. So if I am stimulated, I am supported, I can do things in this respect. So the National Recovery and Resilience Plan is offering positive things. It's also offering challenges. And in this respect, I think it's in an opportunity that is making us feel more and more European. Professor Simoncini, half of the time was used to give this broad overview of what is going on in a precise way. I think that only the meeting of Rimini in full electoral campaign, we have 7 presidents of regions with different political orientations, but here they are all more or less speaking with the same language. I think they deserve a round of applause because this is something that can give us an idea of the sense of the work that has to be done for our country. Having said this, if we are good enough, we can have another round. We have about half an hour. So, Professor Simoncini, we'll start with you. You can start talking about the challenge of the economy and also of culture. We can talk about this later because there are all these problems we've mentioned. So how can we convince the people to believe in a big collective transformation in such a big country, humanistic operation and cultural operation? And above all, how can we not impose but convince? This is something you mentioned this morning with President Amato. You can start.
So I'll be very brief. I also wanted to express the same things that you said before, that you have just said. It's really impressive. Not long ago, comments and remarks over the public administration and on public bodies had always focused on poor resources, and now it's really fantastic to see that we have really lots of resources available. We've heard our presidents talk about resources and investments. The funding is there. So the topic that I would like to bring to your attention was addressed by President Amato this morning. Are resources, so the resources are they enough? Are the laws enough? Actually, we need the people. If there is no involvement, if there is not the sense that we can really be involved, well, then these resources run the risk of not being brought forward by people. So I was wondering the following topics come to mind, like confidence building. In order to convince people, you need to trust someone. So relations like, for example, within the family or at work, at school. I mean, these are the main topics addressed at the Rimini meeting. How can the new opportunities become something on this? Yes, and this is also the other side of the coin. I mean, we also wanted you to address these issues. I would like to start from the last president who's spoken. I'd like to start from President Gianni. What Professor Simoncini has addressed is very important. I mean, this is a challenge that will concern the whole of us Italians and the whole of Italy as a country. How will we be able to convince everybody of the fact that this is a new period? Actually, you've given us, in a way, the sense with your title, Passion for the Person. Article 5 of the Italian Constitution reads that Italy recognizes and promotes local autonomies. So we recognize the identity of the Italian state, but at the same time we realize that being Italian also means that we have to leave space to our regions, to our local autonomies. So, for example, when it came to implement the vaccination campaign, if, for example, German foreign minister, when the German foreign minister praised Mario Draghi for what we have done, that means that we've represented an example. So in 20 different regions, we then flexibly implemented the measures to be implemented differently. We provided about 8.5 million vaccines. So human resources are important. I mean, ours is a state that is divided and articulated in regions, municipalities, and intermediate bodies. So we have to be quicker than before. Very, very clear. President Fugatti. I believe that within the framework of the NRRP, we can identify the objectives and the ideals. But then these objectives and ideals have to come to terms, so to say, with the real problems. The plan focuses a lot on sustainability, but then if you look at the reality, you see that you need to have certain resources, for example, and that if you don't have, for example, gas, you are not able of heating your homes. So you always need to strike a balance between objectives and ideals and then the practical needs. So if the objective of the NRRP is to promote sustainable growth, well, the ultimate objective is to have our communities and our households feel well, and to do that you need to support the growth of the individuals. One problem in this respect is also the fact that we have a very low birth rate. So if we don't have enough doctors in Italy, that's not related to the low birth rates of today. So the objective is that we need to have families feel well so that they feel a renewed confidence and hope in the future. President Isai, so we cannot, we should not forget that the NRRP is targeted to young people. So we need to start from young people. So some Italian regions, in Umbria, for example, also Liguria, we have a very large percentage of elderly people. So that is why we are implementing family policies aimed at supporting the family and children. The NRRP foresees, for example, major investments for kindergartens and similar facilities. So it's also equally important to devote resources to the training of young people. But there's a major issue that needs to be focused on. If we want families and children to continue believing in the family, if we want them to have children, we need to make sure that they have stable jobs, well-paid jobs, jobs that are not precarious and that provide them with stability. That's a prerequisite. If this prerequisite is met, then all the rest can come. And services can be implemented and increased. In other words, all the services that the public sector can do. But that's just but a starting point. So we always have to focus on the human being, and that is something. So focusing on the person is the very important thing, the most important thing. So you say something right. How can we reach that collective change? So that's your responsibility. That's a collective responsibility. So President Totti, we need good systems within which the families and the Italians can live well. So if that happens, everything will be natural.
Well, this is not just a responsibility for politics, but also for the ruling class. It's not just journalists, perhaps, but also big lawyers and big confederations of companies. So we're having a big system crisis. If the vaccine was the treatment for the COVID-19 and got us out of the crisis. Now, the NRRP is the medicine, the treatment for what the pandemic has created in our society. So on the one side, we need the money. On the other side, we need things that we have lost, the ethics of responsibility, the cultural government, the sense of values. So let's be clear. We have to produce more in this country. Anyone that may say that we will be richer and so we will work less, they are on the wrong track. I want to give this country universities where students can receive better education and can be competitive in Europe, but they will study more. I want to give more money in the salary of the Italian workers and reduce the taxes, but everybody is going to work more in quantity and in quality because we cannot redistribute wealth that is not produced in the country. This must be clear. So the NRRP must be really a chance for the ruling classes that got it wrong to learn that it is not possible to obtain results by having less commitment and working less. No, we're going to redistribute money that we will create in our country. I want to take care of how the Germans and other countries will spend this money. And also concerning ecological transition, if the German close the coal-run power stations 5 years after us, well, This makes me think, because if they don't try and do what we want to do, it's, something like there is someone who wants to do something that is not really capable of doing it because they don't yet have the necessary resources. This should not be taken for granted, because these are great difficulties. When we talk about renewable energy, because we may consider a valley the way we know it, or a valley full of wind turbines that has been affected visually. Do we want the same valley, or do we want a valley that is not so nice? There is no a third way that can find everybody agreeing that. Either the NRRP becomes a system for which we can all agree, otherwise we will fail as a country. Now, President Acquaroli. I believe that we are now having a mountain of resources, and standing in front of such a big mountain, it is fundamental to create a vision of the country that can be owned by the people with the responsibilities. People that served as mayors or as public servants sometimes know that some actions do not receive consensus. In fact, sometimes some decisions can make some part of the population happy and another part of the population unhappy and against. So I hope that this time we can be able to use the resources in a way that is based on the full awareness of what Italy should become to be part of Europe, to remain competitive, and to guarantee a future for younger generations. So it is by causing this change and not just by looking for immediate consent that it will be possible to make this tool successful. Otherwise, the risk is that we can meet the needs of part of the Italian people just in their own private interests, but we do not generate a greater vision. We do not generate something that is fundamental for the country's competitiveness. This has been said in terms of energy, but it's also relevant to infrastructures and to the divide between the East and the West and the North and the South. And this is applicable to areas that are working at a different speed. So I think the time has come to get Italy as a country to be confident enough to face the future. I hope that every young person that is born in a small place and another young person that is born in another place with greater opportunity can enjoy the same opportunities. President Fontana, I will be very brief. I agree with what President Acquaroli said, and we're doing this with the ideas that we have in our region, because differences are not just between the North and the South and the West and the East. There are also differences within the region in mountain areas, in depressed areas, areas that do not have enough infrastructure yet. So this is one of our main projects. We want to work in a way so that differences are erased and everybody has equal opportunities regardless of where they were born or where they reside. This is basically the general background, and at the center there has to be the person. Nobody should be left behind, and it is important to consider the idea of relaunching those people or those parts of the community that are less fortunate than others. This is the general idea. Thank you, President. Now the floor goes to President Bonaccini. 2 points. One is about the person, as in the theme of the meeting, and the other is about the institutional system. The first one, everybody has referred to the fact that we are going to invest, we hope to be able to do so, an amount of resources that we could have never imagined to have. And part of this is going to be used in infrastructure, and then we will need the human resources. Just one quick example. If we say that we have to improve the quality and the offer of healthcare systems, in particular at a community and local level, everybody has said that then professionals are needed for that. That's a general problem for everybody, regardless of where we live or regardless of the party we vote for. We know that there is a lack of nurses and doctors. I think that the fiscal pressure should be reduced because there are companies that pay taxes, and those that pay taxes pay too many taxes compared to the rest of Europe. And if we reduce this fiscal pressure, they may have a competitive advantage. But there's also a number of men and women in our country that even if they have a full-time job, they can't really get to the end of the month. So we create opportunities that are permanent contracts, and this is very good in a precarious time, but there's not enough application sometimes when there are these calls for many positions that are long-term positions. So this should make us ask ourselves some questions. After the COVID-19, we saw what has happened. If we don't want to have hospitals and community houses without nurses, without doctors, we have to pay them more and better. There's no other way around that. And second point, we need professionals. We know that the government has made an important provision. It will be easier for the students in the specialization to get into the practice immediately. But can we still waiting to do this? If this is a problem today in 2022, it will be a big problem in the future. Is it the capped system to get access to medicine courses at the university? Is it still possible to have a capped system? I don't think so. For 5 years and a half, I was president of the Conference of the Regions before Massimiliano Fredriga. Giovanni was my vice president, and then Giovanni lived the third and the fourth wave, and with the others we experienced the first wave. So they would all say the same things. If I look back, I really wonder how we could stand, because after Wuhan, we were the only country affected, some regions more than others, and before going to sleep, we were really asking ourselves whether we would have taken the correct choices, because we had no experience. That means that Italy has human resources that are much better, far better than those that are being demonstrated concretely sometimes. In those 5 years and a half, I was able to be president of the Conference of the Regions thanks to them, and we had to deal with 5 different governments in 5.5 years. Be careful, because the credibility of a president of the region or a mayor is also linked to the fact that when they are elected, they have 5 years in front of them. But if every year the government of a country changes, we can have a superhero as the president, but how can they demonstrate something? So I do hope that the future parliament, the future government can find the ability to finish their term. I wish that the leaders of the parties said in this campaign, whoever wins will not change the design of the PNRR and the involvement of the regions.
So, Professor Simoncini, can you make some remarks based on what we have just heard? I have 2 remarks. The first, it seems to me that we live in a different world. I mean, this is real politics, like the one. This is politics like the politics that is made in the electoral campaign, but there's a common language, there's different political cultures, but it seems to me that actually the central issues are common to everybody. And this is, I think, what Italians really want from politics. The Italians want people to identify the core issues and identify the problems to solve and the solutions to solve these problems. Sometimes people say that the political message is not clear. I think that it's very important to distinguish between the political party, the political group, so to say, the one belongs to, and the political judgment. It seems to me that the ideas that have emerged are quite clear, so I would immediately follow what our presidents have told us. So we need, of course, a group, a political group, when one goes to vote, but there's also, in my opinion, yet another possibility of doing politics. If I may say, as a journalist, I think that there's a representation of politics that is given by politics towards itself, but then there's another politics that is often not narrated. So you have public statements, but then there's common work behind. The public statements are needed. This is something that I have experienced among the mayors, the presidents of the regions, and so on. So oftentimes we represent ourselves in a much worse way than what we actually are. So 1 minute each. So I would like to give you 1 minute each to tell us what your flagship project is. So we have a project that aims at combating coastal erosion. In Tuscany, there are 10 provinces and 5 of them are on the sea. There's over 40 municipalities bordering the sea, and the climate change that we are all witnessing are very severe. We have storms, we have drought, we've had fires, and therefore we're facing a major problem. Our shores have been transformed, and that's an environmental, tourist, and cultural project. So we are spending resources to combat coastal erosion. Then I've seen that there are others who get 500 million euros on hydrogen technologies. So next to that, I will try and ask some more a more balanced approach to get more resources also on this kind of project. Our flagship project is focuses on the digitalization of public administration. Ours is a small area. There are mountain municipalities. There are large valleys. So it's very important to network as much as possible all these administrations with digital solutions. That's our main project. Madam Tesei, our flagship project is hydrogen. The hydrogen that President Gianni was talking about. We rank among the first 5 regions who saw their hydrogen projects approved. These projects are still in their initial phases, and we are going to go through a number of steps, research and development, and then tangible implementation. But there are some findings already achieved. So first of all, a hydrogen power plant. There is a very important site in Terni, Acciai Speciali Terni. That's a still work in Terni, and we are working on that. And thanks to the complementary NRRP, we are going to implement this project, which will also be applied to L'Aquila and Sulmona in the Abruzzo region. Liguria, what's your flagship project? That's probably a fixation of Italian TV journalists. Time goes by, but actually you've been capable of sticking to the timetable allotted to you. Oftentimes when we visit you in the morning in TV, we are less clear. So we, as far as we are concerned, we are building a research center that was going to collaborate with the University of Genoa and the National Research Center. 500 beds. There's going to be a neurological park focusing on neurosciences. That's a European project that brings together the best there is of one of the most important research centers. Then the treatment of our patients in the area of neurosciences is very important in a country which is made up of which is characterized by the presence of many elderly people and unfortunately many neurodegenerative diseases. So a passion for the person. And that's also testifies to the integration of funds. We're talking about a hospital, a university, a research center, the Italian Technology Institute. So we're talking about something that can be really very important to change people's quality of life. Marche. We've chosen the villages. The towns. Our region has 1.5 million inhabitants. There are very few cities. There's slightly more than 20. So I think that it is fundamental to recover our huge cultural, historical heritage. There is art, there are traditions. The leading manufacturing companies come from our landscape, and there's also a beautiful landscape, and we would like to network all of these villages and small towns to give them a second life, making it possible for young people to remain there, to start tourist projects, artisan projects, to try and recover this huge heritage, which is an opportunity for us, and I believe it can be so also for the whole country. Lombardy, what's your flagship project? Well, not hydrogen. It's not a hydrogen project. We had already started with that project. We will build a hydrogen-powered railway in the Val Camonica, and I think that's a great initiative. President Bonaccini, it's actually what I've talked about before. We have the meteorological center hosted in Bologna for the 27 member states. That's the first calculation computer in Europe, and that will be used by universities and research centers to make Italy and Europe competitive. And to make us on a par between the United States and China. We're proud of that because I feel Italian, and I believe that the European dimension is the only one that can help us out of our difficult times. So, Professor Simoncini, we still have some minutes. Would you like to draw to a close of what has emerged? It's very difficult to draw some conclusions. We've listened to 7 presidents who have presented 7 different portraits of Italy. Also, this final presentation of the flagship projects gives us an idea of the potential we all have. First of all, I would like to thank all of them, all of you. This is a moment of electoral campaign. It's a very complicated moment, and you found the time and the will to come together and communicate. And you've given us a very important message. I mean, this way of doing politics is possible. It is possible that starts from practical problems, from the willingness to implement them and put in place things that we really need. What I would like to say is that if we do politics in this way, well, then maybe we will we might not understand the delegitimizing politics that is often heard on TV or read on the news. That's for sure. But I'm very happy of the fact that that the Rimini meeting has focused on regional authorities, because this way we have the chance of having this way of doing politics be better understood. So once again, on the occasion of the Rimini Meeting Foundation, I would like to thank you very all for your kind participation. we all interpret reality differently based on our own personal experience. But I believe that what we truly perceive in Rimini is this sense of community. There is great enthusiasm. There are differences, of course, in the way in which problems are faced, but there's this sense of community. So the Rimini meeting is a unique event. It's been living for many, many years. There are hundreds of people who every year work behind the scenes to organize all of this and to have this the possibility of thinking together and exchanging views and ideas as we've done today. So I would like to tell you that in the area of the trade fair, you will find counters, desks with the red heart label. The Rimini meeting needs donations. There's also big novelty this year. If you want, your donation to the Rimini meeting will be deducted from the tax declaration. And then the Rimini meeting is an occasion to exchange ideas. Once again, I would like to thank Francesco Acquaroli, Stefano Bonaccini, Attilio Fontana, Maurizio Fugatti, Eugenio Giani, Donatella Tesei, Giovanni Toti, President of Liguria. Thanks to you all for this wonderful exchange of views here at the meeting. And I would like to add one final thing. I would like to thank all the people, the technicians, and all the people who have contributed to the organization of this session. I hope I'll be able to be with you again next year. Thank you a lot.
La civiltà dell'amore, fratelli e sorelle, costruite senza stancarvi mai questa civiltà. Lavorate per questo, pregate per questo, soffrite per questo.
Viviamo momenti unici che vogliamo proteggere. Scegli Immagina adesso di Generali, un'unica polizza che evolve con te. Contatta subito i nostri agenti generali per scoprire la soluzione più adatta a te. Prima della sottoscrizione leggere il set informativo su generali.it. Generali, partner di vita.
Siamo Invitalia. Lavoriamo per lo sviluppo del Paese e crediamo nel valore delle sue risorse. Un giovane pieno di talento, un territorio ricco di potenzialità, un'impresa che vuole crescere, una pubblica amministrazione pronta ad innovare. Il nostro Paese ha un potenziale di sviluppo inespresso. Per questo lavoriamo con la pubblica amministrazione, per riconoscerlo e orientarlo alla crescita. Aiutiamo i territori ad essere più attrattivi e connessi con la loro memoria. Siamo al fianco delle imprese che puntano ad essere più innovative e competitive, al fianco dei giovani e delle donne che hanno un'idea di futuro e vogliono realizzarla, anche quando il futuro è tutto da ricostruire. Facciamo questo con la responsabilità di chi crede nelle risorse del proprio paese e si impegna a renderle protagoniste.
Sta pulendo il tavolo.